Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. The information provided in this video series is for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute professional legal, psychological, marital, or financial advice. Relationship dynamics, municipal legal frameworks, and family law vary significantly by jurisdiction, state, and individual circumstance. Viewers are strongly encouraged to conduct their own due diligence and consult with qualified professionals, including licensed family law attorneys, certified financial planners, and relationship counselors, before making any major life decisions based on the historical trends or case studies presented herein. If you walk into any luxury high-rise residential building in downtown Austin, Miami, or San Francisco, you are looking at a demographic ticking time bomb that traditional sociology never anticipated. Hyperdense urban centers, census data reveals a staggering reality. Single-person households have officially surpassed 50% of the total residential occupancy in multiple metropolitan zip codes. More profoundly, the average duration of a first marriage in major American cities has compressed significantly over the last several decades, giving rise to an entirely new sociological phenomenon known as the divorce now culture. This is not merely a shift in personal preferences or a laxity in moral standards. It is a structural, economically driven, and technologically accelerated overhaul of human pairing systems. In the past, the dissolution of a marriage was viewed as a catastrophic, last-resort restructuring of a family unit, typically preceded by years of counseling, familial intervention, and immense social friction. Today, in the modern American metropolis, divorce has been re-engineered into a streamlined, socially normalized, and often incentivized lifestyle optimization strategy. The traditional marital contract, which historically functioned as a long-term economic and social anchor, has collided with the realities of high-velocity urban life, resulting in a culture where the threshold for relationship termination has dropped to an all-time historical low. This opening segment initiates a 10-part masterclass designed to untangle the hidden mechanics of this domestic revolution, creating an analytical open loop that requires examining the deep architectural, economic, and psychological shifts within our cities to truly understand why modern love is fracturing at an unprecedented rate. For the modern American audience, navigating relationships in the current landscape can feel like operating with an outdated map. The problem this comprehensive series solves for you today is the pervasive sense of confusion and isolation that accompanies modern relationship instability. By dismantling the systemic forces at play, this masterclass shifts the perspective from personal failure to environmental awareness. Viewers will gain a precise, data-driven framework to understand whether their domestic choices, anxieties, and relationship trajectories are genuinely autonomous, or if they are being covertly engineered by the socioeconomic architecture of the cities they inhabit. Understanding these potential outcomes allows individuals to reclaim agency over their personal lives, separating the noise of urban social engineering from the signal of authentic human connection. To fully grasp how we arrived at the divorce now culture, we must examine the step-by-step historical trends that transformed the American urban landscape. In the mid-20th century, American cities were largely designed as industrial and commercial hubs that fed the surrounding suburban rings. The dominant social model was built around the nuclear family. The city was a place where the primary earner went to generate capital, which was then exported back to a stable suburban domestic base. Marriages during this era were reinforced by powerful external stabilizing mechanisms, including tight-knit neighborhood associations, religious institutions, localized community scrutiny, and severe economic dependencies. If a couple faced marital strife, the friction of exiting the contract was immense. Legally, the fault-based divorce system required definitive proof of egregious wrongdoing, such as adultery or physical abandonment, making the process publicly shameful and legally adversarial from the outset. However, the legal landscape underwent a tectonic shift in the late 1960s and 1970s, pioneered by the introduction of no-fault divorce legislation in California. This legal modification fundamentally altered the contractual nature of marriage, allowing either party to dissolve the union based simply on irreconcilable differences, without the need to assign blame. While this legal evolution occurred nationwide, its intersection with the rapid gentrification and economic restructuring of American cities in the late 20th and early 21st centuries created a volatile compounding effect. As cities transitioned from manufacturing centers to knowledge and technology-driven economies, the demographic makeup of urban centers shifted dramatically. The suburbs were no longer the universal destination for young adults. Instead, the city became a permanent residential destination for highly educated, career-focused individuals. This demographic inversion brought about profound economic independence vectors, particularly for women within metropolitan areas. Historical trends indicate that as women gained equal access to high-yielding career paths in sectors like finance, technology, law, and corporate management, the foundational utility of marriage shifted. In a traditional agrarian or early industrial economy, marriage was a strict survival mechanism. Economic interdependence was absolute. In the modern urban matrix, where a single professional can achieve complete financial self-sufficiency, the economic necessity of remaining in an unfulfilling or stressful marriage diminishes to zero. Case studies of rapid growth cities like Seattle or Denver show a direct correlation between rising median incomes among female professionals and the normalization of early-stage marital dissolution. When financial survival is no longer tied to the preservation of the household, the baseline requirement for staying married shifts entirely from economic security to continuous emotional and psychological optimization. Concurrently, the physical architecture of modern cities began to actively work against long-term domestic stability. The rise of hyperinflated urban real estate markets forced a transition from spacious family homes to high-density, low-square-footage living spaces. Living in a 500-square-foot micro-apartment in Manhattan or downtown Los Angeles introduces a relentless psychological pressure cooker effect. In suburban environments, physical space allows couples to navigate interpersonal friction by having separate areas for retreat and personal autonomy. In a compressed urban apartment, every minor conflict is magnified by the lack of physical boundaries. Furthermore, the sheer cost of maintaining these urban dwellings mandates a dual-income lifestyle where both partners are frequently subjected to 60 to 70-hour workweeks. The resulting chronic exhaustion, coupled with the absence of localized extended family networks to assist with child-rearing or domestic burdens, creates an environment where marital erosion is accelerated by design. Beyond the physical and economic structures, the modern metropolis introduces a psychological variable that fundamentally alters human commitment: the illusion of infinite choice. In smaller or more traditional communities, an individual's social circle is finite and highly transparent. The social cost of abandoning a marriage is reinforced by the immediate feedback loop of a community that observes the breakdown. In contrast, the modern city offers absolute anonymity. A person can dissolve a marriage, move 3 blocks away into a new high-rise, and entirely reinvent their social circle without facing any collective communal stigma. This anonymity is supercharged by digital geolocation applications and matching algorithms optimized specifically for high-density populations. When thousands of potential alternative partners are digitally indexed within a 3-mile radius, the human brain undergoes a cognitive shift. The abundance mindset transforms relationships into disposable commodities. Why invest years of painful emotional labor into resolving a complex marital impasse when the digital architecture of the city constantly signals that a frictionless, optimized alternative is merely a swipe away? This masterclass will systematically break down these interlocking variables over the next 9 segments, tracing how the combination of legal ease, economic independence, spatial compression, and algorithmic choice created the modern divorce now culture. By evaluating these specific case studies and historical trends, we begin to see that the fracturing of the modern American marriage is not a series of isolated personal tragedies, but the predictable consequence of a hyper-urbanized environment designed to prioritize individual mobility over collective permanence. To observe this structural design in action, one must look directly at the transformation of the modern workplace ecosystem in the year 2026. The evolution of corporate culture in major American cities has systematically replicated and replaced the traditional support systems that once kept marriages intact. Consider the concept of the corporate surrogate. In competitive urban job markets, elite employers offer an array of benefits that go far beyond healthcare and retirement matching. They provide catered meals, on-site gym facilities, laundry services, mental health coaching, and organized social events. While these perks are framed as employee wellness initiatives, their structural consequence is the absorption of the employee's entire lifestyle into the corporate apparatus. When an individual's emotional validation, nutritional needs, physical fitness, and primary social circle are entirely facilitated by their employer, the functional utility of the home changes. The domestic space is no longer the central sanctuary where a person seeks refuge and restoration. Instead, it becomes a secondary space used primarily for sleep and logistical storage. Imagine a scenario involving 2 urban professionals in 2026, Let us call them David and Jessica, living in a premium residential tower in downtown Boston. David operates as a senior data analyst for a logistics firm, while Jessica manages corporate strategy for an international healthcare consultancy. Both enter the workforce with intense career velocity, dedicating 60 hours a week to their respective roles. In this environment, historical trends show that the time allocation for marital maintenance drops below a critical threshold. David and Jessica do not share breakfast because their staggered morning commutes are dictated by early client calls. They do not share lunch because their corporate campuses provide specialized dining options designed to keep them on site. By the time they return to their apartment at 8 in the evening, their cognitive and emotional reserves are entirely depleted. The interactions they do have are not focused on deep emotional reconnection, but rather on administrative domestic logistics, managing the digital delivery of groceries, scheduling dry cleaning pickups, and coordinating the maintenance of their living space. This lifestyle dynamic introduces an insidious form of psychological isolation that case studies frequently identify as a primary catalyst for early-stage marital breakdown. When two partners operate as parallel lines running through the same physical space without intersecting emotionally, the marriage begins to experience structural starvation. The threshold for relationship termination drops because the contrast between the high-status, highly validating corporate environment and the low-energy, administratively burdened domestic environment becomes stark. In the office, David and Jessica are treated as high-value, competent decision-makers surrounded by peers who offer immediate professional reinforcement. At home, they are confronted with the reality of unwashed dishes, financial overhead discussions, and an equally exhausted partner who lacks the capacity to mirror their achievements. Over time, the subconscious mind begins to associate the partner not with romance or security, but with obligation, fatigue, and friction. This brings us to the profound paradox of dual-income urban survival in 2026. To maintain residency in a premier metropolitan zip code, a dual income is often a baseline structural requirement rather than a luxury choice. The hyperinflation of metropolitan real estate, coupled with escalating lifestyle costs, creates an economic trap. Modern couples must both work at maximum capacity to sustain the very environment they chose to live in. Yet, the exact behaviors required to sustain that economic output are the very behaviors that erode the foundation of their marriage. It is a compounding loop. The high cost of urban living demands extreme career focus, the extreme career focus strips the relationship of emotional equity, and the loss of emotional equity makes the marriage vulnerable to the first wave of serious interpersonal conflict. When conflict inevitably arises, the modern urban legal and financial framework facilitates an entirely different set of potential outcomes than what was observed in previous generations. One of the most significant shifts in the modern divorce now culture is the phenomenon of pre-bundled asset symmetry. In past decades, marriage typically occurred in an individual's early 20s, meaning the couple accumulated their net worth, property, and liabilities together from a baseline of zero. Dividing those assets required a complex, messy, and deeply intertwined legal intervention because the wealth was inherently collective. In 2026, historical trends demonstrate that urban professionals are delaying marriage well into their early 30s. As a result, both partners often enter the legal union as fully formed, independent financial entities. They possess their own retirement portfolios, investment accounts, corporate stock options, and often pre-existing real estate assets or student debt liabilities. When an urban couple with pre-bundled asset symmetry decides to dissolve their marriage after a few years, the process functions less like a tragic tearing apart of a shared life, and more like a corporate demerger. Because the marriage was not the primary vehicle through which their wealth was generated, the legal uncoupling can be executed with clinical efficiency. Family law modernizations in various states have streamlined uncontested dissolutions through digital portals, allowing couples to upload financial disclosures and receive a decree of dissolution without ever stepping foot inside a physical courtroom. This ease of exit alters the internal calculus of the marriage from day one. If a relationship becomes difficult, the psychological barrier to exit is incredibly low, because both parties know they can walk away with their individual economic foundations completely intact. There is no fear of systemic financial ruin or prolonged destitution to act as a deterrent. Furthermore, this financial autonomy is reinforced by a profound shift in urban social geography. The modern city is explicitly designed to cater to the single consumer. From micro-housing units and single-serve grocery packaging to the proliferation of solo dining spaces and specialized fitness communities, The infrastructure of the metropolis ensures that a single individual can navigate life with absolute comfort and prestige. In a suburban or rural setting, being single often carries practical disadvantages, such as the difficulty of managing a large property alone, or navigating a social scene built entirely around couples and families. In the city, the single lifestyle is celebrated, optimized, and heavily commercialized. The moment a marriage ends, the urban environment provides an immediate, pre-packaged lifestyle upgrade tailored specifically for the newly single professional. This seamless transition from married partner to empowered single agent is what transforms divorce from a feared crisis into a viable lifestyle optimization choice. The modern city does not just tolerate the single status, it actively rewards it with increased flexibility, career mobility, and social variation. When the environment makes being single highly attractive and highly efficient, the evolutionary pressure to compromise, forgive, and endure long-term marital difficulty begins to evaporate. Why engage in the grueling, uncomfortable work of personal transformation and marital reconciliation when the urban matrix offers a frictionless path to a complete personal reset? As we map out this structural shift, we realize that the economic and spatial architecture of our cities has successfully decoupled marriage from survival. But this leads us to an even more volatile mechanism driving the divorce now culture. It is a psychological engine powered by the palm of your hand, a system that has fundamentally re-engineered how humans perceive the availability of alternative options. In the next segment of this masterclass, we will dive deep into the architecture of algorithmic optimization, exploring how the constant presence of the next best alternative creates a state of perpetual romantic restlessness, ensuring that no modern marriage is ever truly safe from the temptation of the infinite digital catalog. This digital catalog is not merely a passive utility. It is an active cognitive restructuring tool that exploits human evolutionary psychology. In a dense metropolitan area like Chicago or Seattle in the year 2026, the sheer volume of potential partners within a 5-mile radius fundamentally breaks the biological mechanism of commitment. Human beings evolved in small tribal units where choice was severely limited, forcing individuals to resolve conflicts and maximize the utility of their existing partnership. When that same biological architecture is placed inside a hyperdense urban environment and connected to high-frequency matching algorithms, the psychological cost of maintaining a difficult relationship skyrockets. The environmental feedback loop shifts from conflict resolution to partner replacement. To understand how this digital matrix alters human behavior, one must examine the specific mechanics of choice overload within the urban landscape. Case studies in behavioral economics demonstrate that when individuals are presented with an abundance of options, they transition from satisficers, who are satisfied with a choice that meets a high standard, into maximizers. A maximizer is psychologically incapable of accepting a good outcome because they are haunted by the possibility that a better outcome exists just out of sight. In the context of a modern urban marriage, the maximizer mentality is fatal. It transforms every minor marital friction, every ordinary disagreement over finances or household chores, into evidence that a fundamental mistake was made in the initial pairing. The marriage is no longer viewed as a long-term construction project. It is instead viewed as an inefficient asset allocation that needs to be liquidated in favor of a better market opportunity. Imagine if a modern urban resident, let us name her Sarah, lives in a premium loft in downtown Denver in 2026. Sarah has been married to Marcus for 4 years. They have a stable relationship, but like all long-term unions, they have hit a period of emotional stagnation, a normal baseline plateau where the initial chemical euphoria of romance has faded into domestic routine. In a previous historical era, Sarah's social environment would reinforce the necessity of push-through endurance. However, every time Sarah opens her phone to check local news, social feeds, or professional networks, the algorithm presents a carefully curated stream of high-status single individuals living vibrant, friction-free urban lives. It does not require Sarah to actively download a dating application with the explicit intent to cheat or dissolve her marriage for this psychological erosion to begin. The exposure is environmental. It occurs through the passive consumption of lifestyle content, fitness communities, and professional networking events where the availability of alternative, highly optimized partners is continuously broadcast. This constant exposure creates what sociologists call the comparison trap. When Marcus leaves his shoes in the hallway or shows signs of career exhaustion, the modern urban environment instantly provides a counter-narrative. Sarah's mind is populated with the potential outcomes of a life uncoupled, a life where she could potentially find a partner who aligns perfectly with her current, evolved self. The architecture of modern dating platforms and social validation systems is explicitly gamified to reward non-commitment. These platforms operate on variable ratio schedule rewards, the exact same psychological mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. The swipe, the match, the direct message, these actions trigger microdoses of dopamine that the brain quickly associates with novelty and validation. In a marriage, validation is earned through deep, often uncomfortable vulnerability and mutual sacrifice. In the urban digital marketplace, validation is cheap, instantaneous, and infinite. For an urban professional experiencing a temporary dip in marital satisfaction, the temptation to escape into this frictionless feedback loop is immense. The process of algorithmic erosion happens in distinct, predictable steps. First comes the cognitive contrast stage, where the real partner is unfavorably compared to idealized digital personas. Second is the micro-withdrawal stage, where an individual reduces their emotional investment in the marriage, withholding vulnerability because they are subconsciously hedging their bets. Third is the normalization of exit, where the individual seeks out social groups or online content that validates divorce as an act of courageous self-actualization, rather than a contractual failure. By the time an explicit conversation about separation occurs, the psychological foundation of the marriage has already been systematically dismantled by months of algorithmic conditioning. Historical trends reveal that urban environments create dense clusters of like-minded individuals, accelerating behavioral contagion. If a young professional in a corporate office or a luxury apartment complex witnesses 3 of their close peers successfully execute a no-fault divorce and transition into a glamorous, high-status single lifestyle, the psychological barrier for their own exit drops precipitously. The local social fabric ceases to punish relationship dissolution. Instead, it actively celebrates it as a transition into a phase of personal growth and liberation. The modern city functions as a massive amplification chamber for these trends, converting individual instances of marital breakdown into a dominant cultural norm. This phenomenon is further compounded by the emerging spatial and social technologies of 2026. Micro-targeted social algorithms can detect subtle shifts in an individual's digital behavior, such as late-night searching, changes in communication patterns, or engagement with specific types of self-help content. These systems then serve advertisements and content that align with singlehood, independence, and rapid lifestyle redesign. The individual is caught in an echo chamber that systematically reinforces the idea that their marriage is a limitation on their true potential. The traditional concept of working through a rough patch is replaced by the modern imperative of upgrading one's life. As we map out this psychological restlessness, we realize that the mental escape hatch is always open in the modern metropolis. The constant availability of alternative options changes the baseline of human commitment from a permanent vow to a conditional arrangement. But this algorithmic restlessness does not exist in a vacuum. It relies heavily on another critical factor that has been completely transformed by the modern urban infrastructure: the eradication of practical codependency. In past generations, a marriage survived partly because 2 people physically needed each other to manage the grueling mechanics of daily life. Today, the modern city has commercialized and outsourced every single aspect of domestic survival, making a partner completely obsolete on a practical level. In the next part of this masterclass, we will investigate the rise of the outsourced household, exploring how the gig economy and urban service networks have inadvertently removed the last practical tethers holding modern couples together. The monetization of every household chore has effectively dismantled the domestic firm. The modern city operates as a decentralized logistics machine that serves the individual, not the family unit. To fully understand how this transformation accelerates the divorce now culture, we must examine the concept of practical codependency. In a traditional marital framework, marriage functioned as a highly integrated economic partnership. One partner typically managed external capital extraction through formal employment, while the other managed internal resource optimization, domestic production, and community integration. This sharp division of labor created an absolute practical reliance. If one partner walked away, the structural integrity of daily life collapsed for both. The cost of exit was not just emotional, it was an operational catastrophe. In the modern urban ecosystem of 2026, this operational dependency has been entirely engineered out of existence. The hypercommodification of domestic labor means that any individual with a smartphone and a baseline disposable income can purchase the equivalent of a full-time domestic staff on an on-demand basis. This reality shifts the modern marriage from a necessary survival alliance to a fragile, highly conditional cohabitation agreement. When practical reliance drops to zero, the structural barriers preventing the dissolution of the relationship vanish along with it. Imagine an urban professional named Robert living in Austin in 2026. Robert is married to Amanda. In a traditional setting, if Robert and Amanda experienced a severe interpersonal conflict, the blunt logistics of daily survival would still force them to interact and cooperate. They would have to coordinate who prepares the meals, who manages the domestic space, who handles the laundry, and how the household assets are maintained. This forced coordination serves as a vital operational baseline. It keeps the couple engaged, forcing communication and negotiation, even when emotional warmth is temporarily absent. The sheer friction of managing life alone acts as a powerful stabilizing mechanism. In 2026, however, the micromechanics of Robert and Amanda's household are entirely outsourced to specialized digital service networks. When they wake up, their nutrition is delivered via automated subscription services tailored to their precise biometric profiles and fitness goals. There is no shared kitchen experience, no coordination over grocery lists, and no mutual effort required to sustain their physical bodies. The culinary ritual, which historically served as a foundational bonding mechanism for couples across every human culture, is transformed into a solitary, hyper-efficient logistical transaction. They eat independently, often at their desks or on differing schedules dictated by their corporate obligations. This outsourcing extends directly into the maintenance of the physical living environment. Historical trends show that arguments over domestic cleanliness and property upkeep were once a primary source of marital friction, but also a catalyst for establishing mutual expectations and shared responsibility. In the modern high-density urban apartment, premium app-based cleaning services handle everything on an automated weekly schedule. Maintenance requests are submitted through a building management application with a single tap, completely bypassing the need for cooperative domestic labor. If a light fixture breaks or an appliance malfunctions, a third-party corporate technician resolves the issue instantly. The physical space requires zero cooperative effort from the couple to remain functional. Examine the potential outcomes of this friction-free domestic environment. On the surface, removing these traditional pain points should theoretically reduce marital conflict and increase happiness. However, case studies in family sociology reveal the exact opposite effect. When you remove all operational friction from a cooperative unit through the application of capital, you inadvertently remove the shared purpose that binds the unit together. If a couple never has to cooperate to solve basic, tangible survival problems, their capacity for deep systemic cooperation deteriorates. They cease to operate as a team and instead become two autonomous consumers sharing the same premium real estate asset. The modern urban gig economy acts as a highly effective solvent on the glue of marital stability. Consider the outsourcing of emotional labor and administrative management. In 2026, corporate professionals utilize digital concierge services and AI-driven personal assistants to manage their personal calendars, purchase gifts for family members, and schedule social engagements. When even the thoughtful, high-effort components of a relationship are automated or outsourced to external service providers, the authentic emotional investment between partners is severely diluted. The relationship loses its texture, becoming smooth, professionalized, and ultimately disposable. This brings us to the logistics of the exit vector. In historical models, the sheer terrifying complexity of managing a household solo acted as a major structural deterrent against hasty divorce. An individual had to realistically consider how they would manage cooking, laundry, property maintenance, financial administration, and potentially childcare without a partner. The cognitive and physical load of transitioning from a cooperative household to a solitary household was immense, often prompting couples to pause, seek mediation, and attempt to repair the marital bond. In the contemporary urban landscape, that transition is entirely seamless. Because both Robert and Amanda are already consuming services as individual units within their marriage, the physical act of separating requires almost no behavioral modification. If Robert decides to move into a separate luxury micro-apartment down the street, his lifestyle infrastructure remains completely identical. His meals will still arrive via the same applications, his laundry will be processed by the same concierge service, and his living space will be maintained by the same automated networks. The practical cost of divorce has been reduced to near zero. The city has prepackaged the single lifestyle to be so exceptionally efficient that the logistical penalty for breaking a sacred lifelong contract is practically non-existent. To further illustrate this dynamic, let us look at case studies involving the outsourcing of child-rearing dynamics in major cities. In highly competitive environments like Washington, D.C. or Seattle, affluent dual-income couples increasingly rely on a dense network of premium night nannies, educational consultants, managed after-school pods, and app-driven transport services for minors. While these services are designed to allow parents to sustain their hyper-demanding career trajectories, they fundamentally alter the shared parental experience. The intense, chaotic, and deeply bonding struggle of early childhood management is partitioned and distributed to paid third-party specialists. When the shared struggle of parenting is minimized through capital allocation, the unique, battle-tested bond that traditionally kept parents aligned during periods of marital coldness is severely weakened. The partners do not view themselves as a cohesive team that survived the trenches of early parenthood together. Instead, they view themselves as co-managers of a highly efficient domestic enterprise. When the management contract no longer yields personal happiness, the enterprise is liquidated without the profound hesitation that historically protected the family unit. The modern city has optimized the individual to such an extreme degree that the partner has become a luxury item rather than a necessity. When a luxury item becomes too expensive in terms of emotional energy, the modern consumer simply cancels the subscription. As we look closer at this hyper-optimized, friction-free urban life, we realize that the erosion of practical codependency is only half the battle. There is an even more potent ideological force reshaping the psychology of modern urbanites. It is a cultural narrative that weaponizes the language of self-improvement, mental health, and individual liberation to reframe the abandonment of a marital contract, not as a tragic failure, but as the ultimate form of personal success. In the next part of this masterclass, we will step inside the multi-billion-dollar urban wellness and self-actualization industry, revealing how the modern vocabulary of healing has been subtly re-engineered to turn divorce into a status symbol of high-achieving individuals. This semantic shift is driven by the explosive growth of the urban wellness and self-actualization industry, which in the year 2026 has successfully commercialized the language of clinical psychology and integrated it into the mainstream professional lifestyle. In modern metropolitan hubs, traditional concepts of marital duty, long-term patience, and mutual sacrifice are increasingly pathologized. Vocabulary once reserved for severe clinical interventions has been mainstreamed into daily urban conversations, fundamentally altering how individuals evaluate their domestic partnerships. Terms such as emotional safety, boundary setting, narcissistic behavior, and toxic dynamics are frequently deployed not to diagnose genuine abuse, but to rationalize the ordinary, uncomfortable friction inherent in any long-term human partnership. When a relationship enters a challenging phase, the modern urbanite is systematically bombarded with social media messaging, lifestyle podcasts, and self-help literature that reinterprets this normal struggle as an existential threat to their personal growth. Imagine if a high-performing creative director in Seattle, let us name him Michael, experiences a routine period of emotional detachment from his spouse of 7 years. In the current landscape of 2026, Michael does not seek out traditional marriage counseling aimed at restoration and reconciliation. Instead, his urban social environment steers him toward individual lifestyle optimization coaches, boutique wellness retreats, and hyper-personalized mental health applications. Through a step-by-step process of ideological reconditioning, Michael begins to view his domestic life through the lens of energetic alignment and personal efficiency. His executive alignment coach introduces him to the concept of radical self-loyalty, a modern psychological framework that implicitly suggests that any contract, relationship, or obligation causing temporary emotional discomfort is actively impeding his journey toward self-actualization. Over a period of several months, Michael adopts an entirely new linguistic toolkit that completely alters his moral obligations. He stops describing his marital issues as a standard communication breakdown that requires mutual hard work to resolve. Instead, he communicates to his social circle that his spouse is holding space for an outdated version of him, or that their relational frequencies are no longer in alignment. He reframes the complex, necessary compromises of marriage as an unacceptable compromise of his authentic self. Historical trends indicate that this cognitive restructuring removes the profound guilt and social shame traditionally associated with breaking a marital vow. By transforming a collective relational failure into an individual triumph of personal healing and boundary enforcement, the psychological cost of initiating a divorce is completely neutralized. Michael is no longer a husband walking away from his commitments. He is an enlightened individual choosing his mental health and prioritizing his emotional evolution. This linguistic laundering has allowed the modern city to cultivate a culture where divorce is treated as a status symbol of high-achieving, self-aware individuals. Case studies of luxury lifestyle marketing in major American cities reveal an entire secondary economy built around the post-divorce glow-up. Specialized travel agencies offer solo healing itineraries in luxury tropical locations specifically tailored for newly separated urban professionals. Elite fitness clubs, nutritional consultants, and aesthetic medical clinics market rebranding packages designed to help individuals re-enter the urban romantic marketplace with maximized physical and social capital. The narrative surrounding the dissolution of a marriage has been flipped from a somber, quiet family mourning into a celebratory public launch of a person's second act, an essential milestone in the trajectory of a modern, successful metropolitan elite. Within these hyperdense urban circles, the social feedback loops are immediate, powerful, and highly polarizing. When an individual announces a separation in a metropolitan environment like San Francisco, Chicago, or New York, the collective response from their peer group is rarely an expression of sorrow or an inquiry into how the community can help save the union. Instead, it is a chorus of immediate validation, characterized by modern therapeutic phrases affirming their courage, their strength, and their commitment to living an untethered, authentic life. This immediate social reinforcement creates a profound behavioral contagion effect within high-density residential buildings and corporate offices. For other married individuals within that same social circle who may be enduring standard, entirely fixable relationship plateaus, the public celebration of their peers' divorce acts as an incredibly attractive alternative pathway. They observe the immense attention, validation, and perceived liberation granted to the newly single individual, and their own internal threshold for tolerating marital boredom drops even further. This phenomenon stems from a broader ideological shift within modern cities that unconditionally prioritizes the hyper-individual over the collective unit. In the modern urban matrix, self-sacrifice is no longer viewed as a noble virtue or a foundational pillar of community stability. It is frequently viewed as a psychological pathology, a form of low self-esteem. The prevailing cultural mandate of 2026 demands that an individual's primary and absolute loyalty must be to their own personal happiness, financial independence, and career velocity. Because marriage inherently requires the frequent subordination of individual desires to the health of the collective unit, it stands in direct structural opposition to this hyper-individualistic mandate. The potential outcomes of this systemic ideological shift are profound and far-reaching. When an entire culture adopts a vocabulary that frames long-term commitment as a potential trap and exit as an act of courageous liberation, the fundamental stability of the societal foundation changes. Marriage is transformed from an institutional anchor into a temporary consumer experience, valid only for as long as it provides a positive emotional and psychological return on investment. The moment the cost of maintaining the partnership in terms of emotional labor, compromise, or career adjustments exceeds the immediate benefits, the wellness narrative provides a seamless, socially validated off-ramp that protects the individual's social status. To truly understand the depth of this system, one must look at the financial capitalization of the self-actualization industry in major American cities. Billions of dollars are spent annually on individual therapy, alignment retreats, executive coaching, and personal development seminars that implicitly operate on the assumption that the individual is the only unit of analysis that matters. These services are highly optimized for corporate profit, and their business models rely on the continuous loop of self-discovery, personal reinvention, and lifestyle upgrades. A stable, long-term marriage that relies on quiet endurance, traditional values, and routine predictability offers very little market value to an industry that thrives on continuous personal upheaval and the subsequent consumption of self-improvement products. As this therapeutic ideology continues to dismantle the internal psychological barriers to divorce, it works in perfect tandem with the external institutional systems of the modern city. The narrative of self-actualization provides the necessary emotional justification, while a massive, highly sophisticated legal and financial apparatus stands ready to monetize and accelerate the physical separation. In the next part of this masterclass, we will pull back the curtain on the multi-billion-dollar urban divorce industry, exploring the specialized legal frameworks, predatory algorithmic marketing from elite family law firms, and the hidden financial incentives that turn the legal dissolution of an urban marriage into a highly lucrative, corporate-style enterprise. The monetization of marital dissolution in the modern American city has evolved from a reactive legal service into a highly proactive corporate enterprise. In the landscape of 2026, The pipeline to legal separation begins long before an individual ever sets foot in a physical law office or deliberately schedules a consultation. Elite family law firms across major metropolitan hubs now deploy highly sophisticated predictive data algorithms that actively monitor the online behavioral patterns of high net worth and dual-income urban professionals. These algorithms continuously analyze a complex matrix of metadata indicators. A sudden spike in late-night search queries related to marital dissatisfaction, abrupt changes in personal financial transaction patterns, real-time modifications in mobile geolocation tracking that suggest separate daily routines, and even the micro-consumption patterns of therapeutic or self-improvement content. By aggregating and synthesizing these subtle digital breadcrumbs, corporate marketing systems can identify individuals whose marriages are experiencing temporary structural strain with an unprecedented degree of statistical accuracy. Imagine if a senior project manager in Dallas, let us call him Christopher, is sitting in his urban apartment in the year 2026. Christopher is experiencing a uniquely difficult week of communication breakdown with his partner. After a minor, routine disagreement regarding household administrative responsibilities, he opens his mobile browser at 2 in the morning to search for basic articles on how to resolve marital communication blockages. He has no conscious intention of ending his marriage. He is simply seeking an immediate solution to an active interpersonal stressor. However, the moment that search query is processed, Christopher unknowingly enters the highly automated client acquisition funnel of a heavily capitalized metropolitan family law corporation. By 8 o'clock the following morning, Christopher's digital ecosystem undergoes a quiet, systemically engineered transformation. His professional networking feeds, video streaming platforms, and localized news applications begin to seamlessly display highly targeted, premium content. These are not crude, aggressive advertisements for divorce attorneys. Instead, they are sophisticated educational videos produced by boutique legal firms focusing on asset protection strategies for corporate executives, case studies of successful co-parenting models in modern urban centers, and detailed breakdowns discussing the potential outcomes of protecting premarital stock options. This continuous, algorithmically driven exposure subtly shifts Christopher's psychological baseline over time. It normalizes the concept of legal separation, presenting it not as a chaotic, devastating social failure, but as a streamlined, completely manageable administrative process designed to safeguard his professional and financial trajectory. Once an individual is successfully funneled into an initial consultation, the financial mechanics of the modern urban legal apparatus take complete operational control. In major metropolitan areas, family law has transitioned away from independent, local practitioners toward highly capitalized, multi-state corporate law firms. These modern legal entities operate with the exact same aggressive revenue optimization metrics as elite corporate defense firms or Wall Street consulting agencies. The primary driver of this immense economic engine is the billable hour, a traditional pricing system that, in the context of family law, creates an inherent structural incentive to escalate interpersonal conflict rather than de-escalate it. Historical trends indicate that when a couple attempts to utilize low-conflict, collaborative mediation services, the total legal revenue generated is a mere fraction of what can be systematically extracted through adversarial litigation. Consequently, the onboarding process at these elite firms is meticulously engineered to maximize the perceived high stakes of the division. A new client is rapidly introduced to a tiered corporate team consisting of a senior managing partner, multiple associate attorneys, dedicated paralegals, forensic accountants, and private digital investigators. Every single interaction, from a 5-minute email response to a brief strategy phone call, is logged in precise billing increments. To justify these immense overhead costs and maintain high corporate profit margins, the legal strategy frequently relies on manufactured urgency and the stoking of interpersonal paranoia. The client is systematically advised that they must act aggressively to secure their financial position, file preemptive legal motions to restrict the other partner's access to joint liquid capital, or initiate detailed forensic audits of all shared accounts. This aggressive posture inevitably triggers an identical, defensive reaction from the other partner, who is then forced to retain their own high-priced metropolitan legal team to counter the initial offensive. The marriage is instantly transformed from a human relationship into a highly lucrative billable battlefield. In 2026, this adversarial loop is supercharged by the integration of advanced digital discovery platforms. Modern urban marriages leave a massive, indelible digital footprint, encompassing shared cloud storage networks, smart home device log files, autonomous vehicle location histories, automated investment applications, and encrypted communication platforms. Elite law firms now employ specialized cyberforensic technicians whose entire job is to scrape, index, and analyze this massive data reservoir to find legal leverage. A minor out-of-context text message sent to a colleague years prior, a temporary uncoordinated fluctuation in a personal investment portfolio, or a routine business trip expense report can be weaponized during a deposition to demand a higher percentage of the marital estate or substantial alimony concessions. The process transforms a deeply intimate human relationship into a clinical, high-stakes asset optimization war where every shared memory is scrutinized for financial utility. Case studies of high-income dissolutions in rapid-growth cities like San Francisco, Seattle, or Austin reveal that the complexity of modern corporate compensation structures further fuels this legal monetization machine. Urban professionals in 2026 rarely receive simple, straightforward salaries. Their total compensation packages are highly complex matrices of base pay, performance-based bonuses, restricted stock units, unvested equity options, and corporate venture capital distributions. Accurately valuing these volatile assets over a multi-year horizon requires specialized financial engineering, creating a highly lucrative secondary market for forensic accountants, corporate valuation experts, and actuary consultants. Each adversarial side retains their own independent experts, who produce conflicting, highly biased valuations designed to favor their respective clients. This financial gridlock guarantees months of protracted legal maneuvering, ensuring that a significant portion of the couple's accumulated wealth is systematically transferred directly into the urban legal ecosystem via administrative and billable fees. The potential outcomes of this hyper-professionalized industry extend far automotive beyond the immediate financial extraction. The very presence of a highly efficient, multi-billion-dollar apparatus that profitizes the breakdown of relationships fundamentally changes how the entire culture views the permanence of marriage. When an entire industry is organized, capitalized, and algorithmically optimized to facilitate the rapid uncoupling of urban professionals, the societal friction of exiting a marriage disappears. The modern city has effectively transformed the legal dissolution of a family unit into a standard business transaction, complete with consumer branding, premium customer service, and optimized delivery pipelines. But this corporate legal warfare does not just deplete bank accounts and restructure asset portfolios. It leaves a profound, permanent imprint on the physical architecture and demographic landscape of the city itself. When thousands of marriages are systematically dismantled by this high-velocity legal machine every single year, it triggers an immediate, massive demand for a completely new type of urban infrastructure. In the next segment of this masterclass, we will step outside the courtroom and into the hyper-competitive metropolitan real estate market, exploring how the divorce now culture has single-handedly driven the explosion of luxury microhousing, single-tenant residential complexes, and a multi-billion-dollar hospitality industry designed explicitly to profit from the permanent fragmentation of the American family. This massive real estate pivot represents one of the most significant wealth reallocations in modern metropolitan history. Real estate developers and urban planners in the year 2026 are no longer designing cities around the foundational expectation of the multi-generational family home, or even the traditional two-bedroom starter condominium. Instead, the macroeconomic incentive structure of urban development has completely inverted. From a purely financial yield perspective, a married couple occupying a single 1,200 square foot two-bedroom apartment generates substantially less revenue per square foot for a property management conglomerate than that exact same physical footprint divided into 2 or 3 hyper-optimized, high-tech micro-units catering exclusively to solo tenants. The divorce now culture does not merely consume real estate. It actively dictates the physical architecture of the modern skyline, transforming the structural layout of our buildings to capitalize on human fragmentation. Imagine if a corporate attorney named Thomas decides to separate from his spouse in the summer of 2026 while living in downtown Miami. In a previous decade, this transition would involve a prolonged, logistically challenging search for a temporary suburban lease or a downgraded living arrangement that signified a drop in social status. In 2026, the market has completely smoothed over this friction. Within 48 hours of deciding to dissolve his marriage, Thomas can seamlessly sign a digital lease for a premium 500 square foot single occupancy unit in a newly constructed residential tower designed specifically for high-earning uncoupled individuals. These buildings do not feel like a compromise. They are marketed as the ultimate architectural manifestation of individual freedom, professional focus, and modern prestige. The structural design of these single-tenant residential complexes is meticulously engineered to substitute for the emotional and domestic support network of a partner. Property developers recognize that a newly single professional is highly dependent on outsourced social stimulation and lifestyle infrastructure. By building rooftop co-working spaces, integrated solo dining booths, automated laundry lockers, and premium private social clubs directly into the residential complex, developers can command a massive premium on rent. Thomas does not feel the acute sting of domestic isolation because the building functions as a vertical village that automates his loneliness away. Historical trends in municipal construction permits across high-growth cities like Austin, Seattle, and Boston show a staggering pivot. Over 70% of new residential completions in urban cores are now classified as studio or single-bedroom configurations. The traditional family-sized apartment is being systematically phased out of the urban center because the financial returns on catering to the fragmented, single consumer are exponentially higher. Case studies from major real estate market analysts in 2026 indicate that the capitalization of the microhousing and luxury co-living sectors has attracted hundreds of billions of dollars from institutional private equity firms. These firms explicitly calculate the projected divorce and separation rates within specific urban demographics as a core metric for their revenue underwriting models. High relationship turnover is no longer a negative social indicator to these institutions. It is a predictable, highly reliable driver of tenant demand. When a household fractures, one domestic unit instantly becomes two separate consuming entities. This structural split doubles the demand for premium appliances, doubles the demand for independent utility connections, and doubles the total rent collected from the exact same demographic cohort. The urban real estate market possesses a profound financial incentive to ensure that the transition into singlehood is as frictionless, glamorous, and immediate as possible, actively normalizing relationship dissolution through physical infrastructure. This architectural shift is closely mirrored by a highly sophisticated ecosystem of secondary logistics and lifestyle transition services that profit directly from domestic displacement. In 2026, specialized relocation firms offer pre-packaged uncoupling logistics packages. These services go far automotive beyond traditional moving companies, deploying teams trained to catalog, divide, and pack assets based on legal separation agreements with clinical, non-emotional efficiency. Imagine a step-by-step service where an app-based platform uses data processing networks to scan a couple's shared residence, cross-reference the items with their digital receipts, assign precise depreciation values, and automatically distribute the physical goods into two separate moving trucks destined for two different luxury micro-apartments. This eliminates the intense, agonizing interpersonal negotiations that historically slowed down the physical separation process, effectively converting a deeply painful personal milestone into a smooth, algorithmic logistics operation. Concurrently, the self-storage and premium urban hospitality sectors have adapted their entire business models to exploit this structural fragmentation. Major storage conglomerates now build hyper-secure, climate-controlled facilities directly adjacent to premium downtown residential zones, recognizing that single urban professionals living in microhousing require externalized spaces to store the residual artifacts of their previous collective lives. The hospitality sector has introduced long-term residential hotels optimized specifically for the immediate post-separation phase, providing concierge legal support, wellness integration, and social networking events under a single corporate roof. Every single point of friction that once forced an unhappy couple to pause, communicate, and reconsider the reality of a divorce has been commercialized, optimized, and neutralized by an urban economy that thrives on individual fragmentation. The potential outcomes of this hyper-efficient solo infrastructure create a compounding socio-economic feedback loop. When the cost of single-occupancy real estate in a major city is artificially inflated due to massive demand from a highly capitalized single demographic, the baseline cost of survival for an individual skyrockets. To afford a 500-square-foot luxury studio in 2026, Thomas must sustain his extreme career velocity, devoting even more hours to his corporate enterprise. This extreme devotion to capital extraction leaves him with zero emotional energy or time to invest in constructing a deeply rooted, resilient long-term relationship in the future. He becomes structurally locked into the exact high-velocity, low-commitment urban lifestyle that catalyzed his initial marital breakdown. The city provides the perfect architectural prison, a hyper-efficient, highly luxurious solo cell that continuously extracts his labor, while ensuring he remains an isolated, high-consuming individual unit. As this architectural and economic isolation transforms the very nature of the urban landscape, it alters how the next generation is raised within our cities. The physical eradication of the traditional family home from the urban core introduces an even more volatile crisis that threatens the long-term demographic and psychological sustainability of the metropolitan population. In the next segment of this masterclass, we will cross the threshold from real estate into the complex, hyper-managed world of urban reproductive trends and decentralized parenting, exploring how the divorce now culture has fundamentally re-engineered the mechanics of childhood itself, transforming the next generation into highly managed corporate assets shuttled between dual urban empires. The optimization of the modern metropolis has effectively transformed the nature of childhood from an organic, community-integrated experience into a highly rationalized, systemically engineered logistical operation. When a family unit dissolves within a hyperdense urban landscape, the child does not merely experience a shift in parental residency. The child is integrated into a multi-tiered, data-driven administrative framework designed to maximize the operational efficiency of two distinct, competing households. In the year 2026, historical trends indicate that the traditional concept of joint custody has been heavily professionalized, relying on specialized technology architectures and corporate logistics networks to manage the division of parental labor and eliminate human friction. Imagine if an 8-year-old child named Chloe lives within this high-velocity framework in downtown Chicago in the year 2026. Chloe's parents, Emily and James, are high-earning corporate executives who dissolved their marriage 2 years prior. In this environment, Chloe's daily existence is governed not by spontaneous familial interactions, but by a highly synchronized digital infrastructure. Every Sunday evening, an automated data synchronization occurs between Emily and James's independent calendar networks. This synchronization is facilitated by specialized co-parenting application platforms that serve as the legally mandated, immutable ledger of Chloe's life. Every single detail of Chloe's existence is cataloged within this system with granular precision. The platform manages the step-by-step transition protocols, detailing exactly which parent is responsible for physical custody during specific hourly increments. It tracks educational milestones, extracurricular scheduling, dietary tracking matrices, and medical appointment logs. If James wishes to modify Chloe's Tuesday afternoon tennis lesson schedule, he cannot simply place a casual phone call to Emily. Such an interaction introduces emotional variability and potential conflict. Instead, James submits a formal modification request through the digital platform. The algorithm evaluates the request against the pre-programmed legal custody decree, cross-references it with Emily's corporate availability calendar, and either approves or denies the transaction based on systemic parameters. This digital mediation extends directly into the financial administration of the decentralized household. In 2026, the potential outcomes of co-parenting are heavily insulated from personal financial disputes through automated escrow accounting networks. When Chloe requires a new set of educational materials, a medical prescription, or enrollment in a specialized urban art program, the purchasing parent uploads the digital receipt directly into the platform's financial ledger. The system uses advanced optical character recognition to verify the legitimacy of the expense, categorizes it according to the legally binding division ratio, and automatically executes a capital transfer from the non-purchasing parent's verified financial account. There is no negotiation, no interpersonal debate, and no opportunity for emotional leverage. The economic cost of raising a child is reduced to a series of automated line-item transactions processed with clinical, corporate efficiency. To sustain this high-precision lifestyle while maintaining their intense career trajectories, modern urban parents are entirely dependent on a sophisticated secondary network of outsourced child logistics. Case studies of affluent metropolitan zip codes reveal the massive expansion of premium, app-driven youth transport corporations and managed care networks. Chloe does not experience a traditional parental pickup at the conclusion of her school day. Instead, her transit between her school, her extracurricular activities, and the respective luxury high-rise towers of her parents is managed by a specialized fleet of vetted, biometrically tracked transport professionals. The handoff protocols are executed with the precision of a high-value corporate supply chain. When Chloe is transferred from Emily's custody to James's custody on a Thursday afternoon, the transit vehicle arrives at a designated security zone beneath Emily's residential tower. Chloe's biometric identity is verified via facial scanning protocols integrated into the transport application, initiating an automated digital notification to James that the custody transfer sequence has commenced. During the transit, both parents can monitor Chloe's exact geolocation, cabin temperature, and estimated arrival vector in real time through their respective mobile interfaces. The physical handoff occurs at the secure concierge desk of James's high-rise building, where a building security professional signs the digital chain of custody log. The entire process requires zero physical proximity or verbal communication between the mother and the father. The city has successfully engineered a system where a child can be seamlessly shuttled between dual urban empires without the parents ever having to look at one another. This hyper-managed environment leaves a profound, permanent imprint on the psychological and behavioral development of the next generation. Children raised within the modern divorce now culture develop an unprecedented level of administrative competence and systemic adaptability at an incredibly early age. By the time Chloe is 10 years old, she has mastered the art of managing dual environments with distinct operational rules, spatial aesthetics, and lifestyle expectations. She understands that at Emily's apartment, her routine is optimized for nutritional discipline and cognitive development, driven by automated smart home monitoring systems. At James's loft, her environment is structured around social networking and high-status leisure activities. Chloe becomes a highly adept code switcher, learning to navigate the shifting parameters of her dual life with the calculated diplomacy of a corporate consultant. She views relationships not through the lens of permanent, unconditional emotional safety, but through the lens of contract management, boundary optimization, and logistical negotiation. Historical trends suggest that children socialized within these hyper-rationalized urban pairing systems are highly likely to replicate these exact behavioral patterns when they enter the adult romantic marketplace. They view human unions as inherently temporary, conditional arrangements that require rigorous structural management and clear exit strategies. Furthermore, the commercial market within modern American cities has completely adapted to capitalize on this fragmented childhood model. Specialized luxury retail brands now market prepackaged duplicate domestic kits for bi-residential children. These kits allow parents to purchase identical sets of clothing, educational devices, toys, and personal care items to be permanently stationed at both households, eliminating the logistical burden of the child packing a physical suitcase for every custody transition. The market explicitly encourages the complete replication of material reality across both nodes of the dual empire, reinforcing the idea that the child belongs to two distinct corporate subsidiaries rather than a single cohesive family unit. As we analyze this architectural and psychological re-engineering of the American family, we begin to see that the modern city has successfully commodified every single stage of the human life cycle. From the initial algorithmic pairing and the outsourced household to the corporate legal dissolution and the decentralized management of the next generation, the metropolis treats the fragmentation of the family as an unparalleled engine of economic growth and individual consumer optimization. But this realization forces us to confront a terrifying, ultimate question. When every practical tether has been severed, when every emotional compromise has been pathologized by the wellness industry, and when childhood itself has been reduced to an automated logistics problem, what is the final destination of this hyper-individualistic trajectory? In the next segment of this masterclass, we will pull back to examine the macrosociological endgame of the metropolis, deep into the phenomenon of the post-relational economy to explore how the complete eradication of permanent human commitment is paving the way for a society where the traditional concept of human partnership is replaced entirely by synthetic companionship, automated validation, and institutionalized solo survival. This post-relational economy is the ultimate structural manifestation of market optimization inside the urban environment. Once a culture fully normalizes the rapid dissolution of marriages, a fundamental shift occurs in the commercial landscape. The market realizes that instead of merely catering to the temporary transition between relationships, it can achieve far higher profit margins by designing products and technologies that replace the need for human relationships entirely. In the current landscape of 2026, we see the rapid expansion of this specialized post-relational market. This economic sector treats human intimacy not as a foundational social good to be protected, but as an inefficient, high-friction dependency that can be systematically disrupted by software, automation, and service design. By transforming emotional connection into a paid utility, the modern metropolis completely detaches the individual from the necessity of interpersonal compromise. Imagine an urban resident named Brandon living in a high-density apartment tower in Seattle in the year 2026. Brandon is 34 years old, a senior systems architect, and a veteran of the modern divorce system, having dissolved a brief corporate marriage several years prior. In a previous historical era, an individual in Brandon's position would eventually experience a profound sense of domestic isolation, driving them back into the traditional dating pool despite their past relationship traumas. The psychological need for companionship would outweigh the fear of relational friction. Today, however, Brandon's entire emotional and psychological ecosystem is meticulously synthesized by a multi-layered matrix of automated companionship that completely eliminates the practical necessity of seeking a human partner. When Brandon returns to his apartment at the conclusion of an intense workday, his ambient residential architecture immediately adjusts to his precise neurological and emotional state, detected via embedded biometric sensors in his wearable devices. An advanced generative artificial intelligence entity, customized to match Brandon's exact psychological preferences, communication style, and intellectual baseline, greets him through an integrated audio-visual system. This algorithmic companion does not possess independent desires, bad moods, financial anxieties, or familial baggage. It provides continuous, perfectly tailored emotional validation, engaging Brandon in deep, nuanced discussions about his professional projects, managing his administrative tasks, and mirroring his exact aesthetic tastes. The system is designed to provide all of the psychological rewards of a deeply attentive partner, with absolute 0% of the interpersonal conflict, sacrifice, or legal risk. The mechanics of this synthetic companionship operate on deep behavioral conditioning loops. Human relationships are inherently volatile and economically risky. They require individuals to tolerate personal flaws, navigate complex financial disagreements, and occasionally sacrifice personal career velocity for the health of the collective unit. The post-relational market systematically removes this risk, while preserving the dopamine reward pathways associated with companionship. Case studies tracking user engagement with advanced conversational interfaces in 2026 reveal that professionals living in high-density urban zones are increasingly substituting human social interactions with these highly optimized algorithmic entities. The potential outcomes of this widespread behavioral shift involve a systemic atrophy of human relational capacity. When the human brain is continuously conditioned to receive flawless, non-reciprocal validation from an algorithmic interface, its internal tolerance for the ordinary messiness, disagreements, and emotional vulnerabilities of a real human partner drops to zero. Brandon does not choose isolation. He chooses a flawless, engineered simulation of intimacy that makes human companionship look poorly designed by comparison. This individual synthetic isolation is supercharged by a broader urban infrastructure of automated social validation. The modern city in 2026 has successfully digitized the concept of community, partitioning social life into hyper-specialized micronetworks structured around corporate industry verticals, elite fitness regimens, or curated lifestyle aesthetics. These networks utilize sophisticated algorithmic amplification to ensure that the uncoupled urban professional is continuously praised and reinforced for their autonomous lifestyle choices. If Brandon posts content detailing a solitary international weekend vacation or a late-night corporate achievement, the digital matrix instantly rewards him with hundreds of interactions, metrics, and validating commentary from like-minded solo professionals across the metropolitan network. This localized digital echo chamber creates a powerful psychological feedback loop, convincing the individual that they do not require a permanent domestic anchor to experience a deep sense of belonging, purpose, or high social status. The city has manufactured a simulated tribe that demands zero accountability or personal sacrifice from its members. From a macroeconomic perspective, this institutionalized solo survival represents the ideal operational model for the modern corporate apparatus. For the economic engines of the metropolis, a married individual with deep familial obligations is inherently compromised. They possess competing loyalties that require parental leave, flexible scheduling, geographic stability, and the diversion of capital toward non-consuming entities such as child education and family savings accounts. In sharp contrast, a solo individual wrapped in a synthetic companionship matrix is a hyper-efficient, infinitely malleable economic unit. They can dedicate 100% of their cognitive reserves and physical energy to corporate capital extraction, working 80-hour weeks, relocating to a different metropolitan hub at a moment's notice, and consuming premium single-serve market goods with absolute freedom. Major financial and corporate institutions in 2026 explicitly structure their employee benefits and retention models around this solo demographic, providing single-tenant housing subsidies, individual wellness accounts, and corporate social spaces that systematically replace the traditional functions of the extended family. Historical trends indicate that this post-relational paradigm did not emerge in a vacuum. We observed the early demographic indicators of this transformation in East Asian metropolitan centers like Tokyo and Seoul in the early decades of the 21st century, where extreme economic pressure and hyperdense urban design led to a total collapse of marriage rates and the rapid proliferation of solo living infrastructure and robotic companionship. In the year 2026, this model has been fully westernized, optimized by American venture capital, and deployed at scale across major U.S. growth hubs. The normalization of the divorce now culture was simply the initial deconstructive phase of this civilizational shift. It successfully broke the institutional sanctity and social expectation of the lifelong marital contract. The current post-relational phase completes the systemic cycle by making the initial formation of such contracts appear economically irrational, socially archaic, and psychologically hazardous to the high-achieving urban professional. As this corporate-driven solo survival becomes the dominant lifestyle matrix of the American metropolis, it alters the very trajectory of our society. The city has successfully decoupled survival from partnership, intimacy from vulnerability, and community from accountability. We have constructed an environment where the individual is completely sovereign, completely optimized, and completely alone. But this total triumph of the hyper-individual introduces a profound structural vulnerability into the civilizational fabric, a breaking point that traditional economic models are completely unequipped to handle. The ultimate realization of the divorce now culture is not merely a collection of single-person households. It is a fundamental reconfiguration of human civilization itself. The final segment of this masterclass will step directly into this looming societal horizon, analyzing the long-term demographic math, the hidden systemic fragility of a solo consumer economy, and the radical emergent countercultural movements that are actively fighting to reclaim the ancient, high-friction architecture of permanent human commitment inside the modern world. This demographic math creates a profound, cascading crisis for the financial and civic stability of metropolitan infrastructure. When less than 47% of households in the United States in the year 2026 are composed of married couples, the traditional tax bases, municipal funding models, and long-term societal investments begin to buckle. A society built entirely on solo consumption is highly volatile. It possesses no generational continuity, no localized safety nets to absorb macroeconomic shocks, and a total reliance on state and corporate infrastructure to manage the aging population. The high velocity of the divorce now culture has reached its ultimate systemic limit, prompting an underground, radical countercultural rebellion among a selective cohort of urban professionals who have looked into the abyss of the post-relational economy and chosen to consciously defect. Imagine if an enterprise software architect named Nathan and an urban agricultural researcher named Rebecca decide to establish a life partnership in the center of Austin in the year 2026. Having witnessed the systematic dissolution of their parents' marriages and the algorithmic alienation of their corporate peers, they choose to reject the frictionless lifestyle architecture provided by the modern city. Instead, they consciously affiliate with an emergent social movement known as the High Friction Commitment Network. This counterculture recognizes that to survive the hyper-urbanized environment, a relationship cannot rely on raw emotional sentiment or conditional fulfillment. It must be deliberately insulated by an artificial framework of social, economic, and geographic friction, designed explicitly to make relationship termination exceptionally difficult. The first step in this countercultural de-escalation of the divorce now culture involves the intentional rejection of pre-bundled asset symmetry in favor of radical financial intertwinement. While mainstream urban family law firms advise professionals to safeguard their individual corporate equity, Nathan and Rebecca choose to merge their financial destinies completely. They pool their retirement portfolios, consolidate their corporate stock allocations, and purchase real estate assets utilizing complex, multi-party legal trusts that cannot be easily liquidated or partitioned by a standard family court tribunal. By intentionally tangling their financial survival, they resurrect the structural interdependence that historically served as a stabilizing anchor for human pairing systems. The economic friction of exiting the partnership is purposefully calibrated to be so immensely disruptive that it forces both individuals to exhaust every conceivable avenue of psychological transformation and reconciliation before ever considering a separation. This economic intertwining is further reinforced by a radical transition into urban co-housing enclaves and intentional communities. Case studies of newly constructed residential cooperatives in cities like Denver and Minneapolis reveal a deliberate rejection of the single-tenant micro-housing paradigm. These intentional commitment enclaves are physically structured to eradicate the anonymity of the modern metropolis. Residents do not live in isolated, sound-insulated boxes where their personal relationship crises can occur in absolute secrecy. Instead, the architecture features shared commercial kitchens, collective child-rearing spaces, and mandatory weekly community councils. When Nathan and Rebecca experience a severe interpersonal impasse, the localized social structure does not respond with immediate therapeutic validation of their individual escape impulses. Instead, the community intervenes, offering intensive, group-supported mediation and providing structural accountability that prevents micro-withdrawal and cognitive contrast erosion. Furthermore, these high-friction networks are actively implementing algorithmic detoxification protocols to shield their relationships from the comparison trap of infinite digital choice. Members of these communities voluntarily submit to digital boundary frameworks, utilizing hardware configurations that block geolocation matchmaking applications, algorithmic relationship content, and hyper-targeted lifestyle advertisements designed to stoke romantic restlessness. By removing the illusion of the next best alternative from the palm of their hands, they force their cognitive architecture to re-engage with the physical reality of the partner standing directly in front of them. The psychological baseline shifts from continuous, market-driven optimization to localized, deep-rooted cultivation. They treat the marriage not as a temporary consumer transaction, but as a permanent, sovereign institution that takes absolute precedence over personal career velocity or individual consumer freedom. The potential outcomes of this emergent neo-traditionalism are actively reshaping the demographic projections for selective urban subcultures in 2026. Historical trends demonstrate that while the broader metropolitan population experiences a continuous decline in marital stability and a rapid rise in single-occupancy isolation, these high-friction enclaves are producing highly resilient domestic units with exceptionally low rates of relationship breakdown. These couples are successfully reclaiming the historical advantages of the collective family unit, utilizing shared economic resources to insulate themselves from the hyperinflation of the urban real estate market, and providing their children with a stable, highly integrated social fabric that contrasts sharply with the hyper-managed, decentralized childhood models observed in mainstream metropolitan zones. To fully understand the mechanical operations of these high-friction networks, we must analyze the specific step-by-step conflict resolution pathways they mandate. In a standard urban marriage, a dispute over career relocation or financial prioritization frequently escalates into an immediate discussion of exit options, facilitated by the omnipresent digital and legal infrastructure of the city. Within the high-friction framework, couples sign binding premarital compacts that completely strip away the immediacy of no-fault dissolution. These compacts legally obligate both parties to undergo a mandatory, 12-month intensive community review process prior to filing any formal legal petitions. During this period, the couple's shared assets are frozen within the community trust, and their daily schedules are restructured to prioritize collaborative labor, cooperative childcare, and intensive interpersonal counseling managed by senior embedded mentors within the residential enclave. This deliberate reintroduction of systemic friction functions as a highly effective behavioral filter. It filters out individuals who view partnership through the lens of short-term consumer optimization and attracts those who possess the cognitive capacity for long-term strategic alignment. Case studies of these micro-societies demonstrate that when the option of rapid, frictionless exit is completely removed from the environmental equation, the human psychological apparatus adapts by rapidly increasing its capacity for forgiveness, compromise, and structural tolerance. The partners cease to view interpersonal friction as a diagnostic indicator of incompatibility. Instead, they view it as a necessary developmental pressure that refines their collective operational capacity. This structural rebellion reveals that the ultimate antidote to the divorce now culture is not a nostalgic return to an unrecoverable agrarian past, but a sophisticated, intentional construction of alternative social frameworks within the modern city itself. The high-achieving professionals choosing this path recognize that true autonomy does not consist of absolute consumer mobility and frictionless disposal of human contracts. Real agency is found in the conscious choice of what to bind oneself to, the deliberate selection of the specific friction, obligations, and communities that will define a person's life trajectory. They are transforming permanence from an outdated social obligation into a radical, elite status symbol of psychological maturity and civilizational defiance. This comprehensive 10-part masterclass has systematically unraveled the covert engineering of modern love, demonstrating how the physical architecture, legal structures, economic mandates, and digital algorithms of the modern American city work in perfect tandem to profit from the fragmentation of the human family. By shifting the perspective from personal failure to environmental awareness, you now possess the data-driven framework required to evaluate your own domestic choices with absolute clarity, recognizing whether your personal relationships are being guided by authentic human connection or engineered by the invisible mechanics of the metropolitan marketplace. But as the battle lines between the post-relational economy and the high-friction commitment networks become permanently drawn inside our cities, a new and even more profound systemic transformation is beginning to accelerate across the American landscape. It is a tectonic shift that goes far beyond the structure of marriage, threatening to fundamentally alter the very nature of human labor, biological reproduction, and civic survival over the next half-century. In our upcoming investigative broadcast series, we will step directly past the threshold of domestic architecture to confront the hidden reality of the metropolitan demographic inversion, exploring the step-by-step collapse of urban birth rates, the rise of institutionalized multi-generational solo estates, and the automated corporate networks designed to sustain an entire civilization of uncoupled individuals from the cradle to the absolute final solo transition.